Okay. And I'm gonna turn it so I just have my slideshow and not my face.
So then you just do share screen, yeah.
Okay. Slides as virtual.
Oh, go back to basic.
At the top.
Oh, the top.
Oh, okay.
And then
Oh God.
Desktop. Or yeah, yours.
That one?
Yeah, there you go. Because I was confused.
Okay. Share. And then I'm gonna make this bigger than that. We're doing great. As I say to myself, enter full screen.
there we go. And then you can just move your little face people or like minimize it. It's part of your art.
Yeah.
It's part of your art.
Although, I wonder, do I need to like, how do I make it so I just look at one page at a time?
Oh, is that a bunch of pages right now?
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe like that. It's cropping it off a little bit, but that's okay.
Oh, that's pretty dang great.
That's cool.
Okay, cool. All right, then I'm gonna stop going like this and go in a more normal posture. Thanks for coming and listening to me talk. And look at the time it is. So I can time myself. Yeah, I'm Katey Rissi, like Glenn and Maria said, and this is my little talk. And yeah, I want to see if okay, that's kind of weird. That's okay. Oh goodness, I need my little script. So this is me eating toast at my house in front of a bunch of art that I did. And yeah, I'm an artist, I'm an art teacher. I identify as a folk ecologist, which for me means like a lay person that's really interested in ecology. That informs a lot of my work. I grew up in Western Michigan. I studied art at Western Michigan University. I did graphic design and I did a concentration in printmaking and photography. I moved out west in 2011. Was really moved by the landscapes of the West, spent some time in Colorado, and then have been living in Western Washington since 2013. And yeah, when I was growing up, I spent a lot of time in the woods. I grew up in an area that had a lot of sprawl and development. But on the flip side, also a lot of blight and decaying industrial infrastructure and environmental degradation, and not a strong ethos for environmental stewardship. So that type of landscape really informed my perception of the world and my relationship with nature. I was really into fantasy books and anything that depicted simplicity and magic and systems in balance when I was a kid. And I think that was really a response to the environment I was in. When I was 13, September 11th happened. And I mentioned that, it sounds kind of random, but I mentioned that because that had a absolutely massive impact on my sense of justice and my worldview. It was the first time that I had started considering themes or ideas around apocalypse and collapse. And the first time that I started to question cultural narratives. And that just had a really big impact on who I was as a person. Growing up in this place where there was a lot of this really specific type of degradation, that just really impacted the way I was thinking. And yeah, the person that reread Lord of the Rings in a tree over and over again in the middle of the woods, and the person who was wondering if maybe there wasn't going to be an America and maybe there shouldn't be an America, and writing crappy 13-year-old poems about it. Still feels like that's me, and that's the perspective I'm making my art from. And I'm really grateful for this talk because I feel like that encouraged me to think in those terms, and I wasn't really thinking about that so much in my conscious mind until I started doing this. And these two images that I'm using for this like Katey growing up part are from a photo series I did called Secondary Succession. And these are images that are taken around Michigan, and they're sort of juxtaposed multiple exposed images of ecosystems that I really cherish and love, and blight and industrial decay will relate on top of each other. Yeah, I have a little bit of a blurb about that project, and it says, the earliest memory I have of an ecological idea sticking with me was reading about succession communities on an information board in a state park in the Lake Michigan Dunelands. Ecological succession is the process of species change in an ecological community over time. Ecological succession happens with a certain rhythm. Ecosystems build on themselves, creating increasingly complex environments as time goes on. When ecosystems are in balance, succession builds until it becomes a stable climax community. If you imagine the process of a field turning into a forest, the process of that shift is ecological succession. Colonization, resource extraction, industrialization, blight, sprawl, these interrupt the rhythms and processes of ecological succession, starting the process over or keeping ecological communities stuck in parts of the process. This is my layperson's understanding of the concept, but I feel it in my bones as I interact with these ecosystems. Spaces in transition. This doesn't make them less of a miracle, but I grieve for the interruptions anyway. So this is just a little photo snapshot of that project as background info on kidney. So the next thing I want to talk about is my process. Hello to people who just walked in. Yeah. I'm really interested in process art and the process that you take to get to finished results. I'm a lot more interested in that than finished pieces themselves. So I work in printmaking, photography, natural dye, what else? Other mediums like weaving, upcycling things, making things with natural materials. And it's really a materials like research. And that's like how I look at the work that I make. So this is an image collage of just some pieces of works in progress. And yeah, like photo, dye, and printing are all mediums that have historically been technological processes first and art mediums second. So, you know, the reason that photography was invented or printmaking was to, you know, do something that wasn't necessarily explicitly artful, and it was later that people started working with those mediums in like an art way. So I like that tension. I like that, especially those three, print, dye, and photography, have this like really rich, super methodical, like process-based history. I like subverting that and approaching these things in a really intuitive way and experimental way. I like to skip steps on purpose, and I like to try to do things wrong just to see what happens. And I get a lot of happy accidents that way. So this top right corner photo is a bunch of dye experiments overlaid on this gigantic piece of chiffon silk. And bottom right is, I guess it's probably not, it's still right for you guys. Yeah, bottom right is a cyanotype experiment on some paper that shouldn't have worked, but did. The left side is a weaving study that I did with Scotch fir, which is an invasive species. Yeah. This is a dye experiment. It's an exhaust bath. So it's like the leftover dye from a workshop. And then I was doing all these experiments with like how many times can I dye with this like trash water to see what colors I get and what palette that creates. This is a textile study that's got a bunch of sewing experiments on it, and there are various different cyanotype experiments. Yeah. Again, I'm more interested in what happens as I'm working towards a final piece than the final piece itself. So in that way, most of my work is very theme driven. Usually if something I'm working on has a theme, it will kind of emerge as I've been working on something for a while. And sometimes it's just about the experiment, which I feel like it's really liberating, and it helps me not take myself so seriously. And I just like it. So this next little section is about my teaching practice, which is a really important part of my art making practice. I teach workshops to adults and kids, and for the past few years, I've been working as an art teacher at an elementary school. And yeah, it really gives me a lot of energy in my art making practice. This is an image from a youth printmaking camp that I ran this summer in Port Townsend with teenagers. And this is all work by one artist. She was incredible. I feel really passionately about teaching printmaking specifically, because I feel like it's a really potent communication tool. It's the people's art. It's very, it's a democratized art form. It's been used as a tool for activism because it's such a, it's a communication tool. It's getting multiples out. And then I also feel really strongly about kind of spreading the word, spreading the printmaking gospel, because I think that the processes really invite people to work through their beliefs around perfectionism and preciousness in a way that I think is really important. And it's cool to see people work through that in classes, and it really helps me out too. This is an image from a dye class I taught at the Northwest Herbal Fair this summer. It was a 30-person dye workshop. It was super fun. Hi. Yeah, I also feel really strongly about teaching natural dye because it's a really fundamental ancestral skill for everybody on the face of the earth. And it's a really great way for people to engage with plants in a creative and artful way. I just taught it actually an hour ago, which is crazy. Dyeing's great because a lot of people that maybe don't see themselves as artists get really excited about dyeing, DYEing. And yeah, I like the idea of getting people excited about making things. And I feel like workshops, and specifically the dye workshops, really support that. I've got a little explicit brag here, which is that I realized as I was working on this that I've taught more than 100 people natural dyeing this year. I'm really, really proud of that. Yeah, isn't that neat? Yeah. Oh yeah, and this is my last teaching slide, and this is my former classroom and my fourth graders who are now fifth graders. I was teaching at the Island School on Bainbridge Island as the art teacher, and they were doing a collaborative class-wide collaborative printmaking project. So the left side is the final result. It was a 17-person collaboration. So that's like 17 different kids' drawings, and they arranged all of their drawings together on the screen, and then I exposed it for them, and they were there for every single step of the process. We spent weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks working on this, and most of the time that they were working on this, they were trying to figure out like how they were going to articulate the message that they wanted to articulate, and it was part of this art and activism unit, and it was a really cool project, and they were just really excited about articulating this idea that if you respect nature, you're respecting everything because nature is everything. And they probably spent like 3 hours total talking about that concept, and that was really cool. And we made a bunch of posters and we put them all over the place, and they put them on shirts, and yeah. So teaching's cool. That's the end of that section. Yeah, and then this last section, I try to slow down, is work that I have made in the last couple of years, so more recent work for me. Unfortunately, I don't get to make as much art as I would like to during the school year because I was teaching full-time and then teaching workshops on the weekend. So most of this work, if not all of it, has been made either the last 2 months, exciting, during my residency here at Alchemy, or last summer at my residency in August. So this is one from last summer. And yeah, it's a weird crop now that we're looking at art, but that's okay. You get the gist. This is a piece called Drought Ecology. These are cyanotyped madrone leaves. So the leaves themselves, I was really excited to directly cyanotype on, but they didn't take the chemistry. So that's a really good example of like, this was very much like a process driven project. So I was trying to see which materials would hold a cyanotype. Cyanotype is this analog photography process that is 2 light sensitive chemicals that interact with UV light. So you expose them in the sun, the sunprint. So I printed these impressions of these different plants that I found on Alchemy's property that were just looking sad because it was really dry. So just a practice of noticing and making these impressions of these really dry plants. And we're in a slightly different ecosystem than the one that I'm the most familiar with. So I name it drought ecology, but I don't really know if it was a drought, but it felt like I was having that feeling and response of like, this is really, really dry. And so they're printed on mulberry paper that's then attached to the madrone leaves, and then those are all stitched into these other cyanotype prints that were purposefully underexposed, so they're really light and kind of soft. Yeah, and then
So when you underexposed, you just not leave it out in the sun?
Yeah. So an underexposed cyanotype is a cyanotype that hasn't got enough sunlight on it. And I found out this year through doing a lot of cyanotype studies that when smoke's in the atmosphere, they really underexpose, which I think is a really interesting way to sort of depict a change in our access to the sun. Yeah, this is called A Prayer for the Living World, and it's really, really big. And this was sort of my big main piece that I made last year. These are cyanotypes too. And then the brown colors are botanical dye. It's rose and some other flowers. And then the 2 cyanotype people on the side are me, and I made those impressions by laying on the cyanotype and then did a lot of relief printing on top and screen printing, which you can kind of see this like mycelium print. It was like a motif I was working with a lot last year. And yeah, I'm really into layering different mediums, and so this was a really fun way to do that. The themes that I was working with in this one were envelopment, being absorbed and consumed by the earth, and sort of like a, you know, like, ooh, yeah, way, and time and cycles. So.
How long did you have to lay on it for?
Great question. Until I laid on these until I was sweating so much that I could not stay still for even a second longer. So that was how I marked that time. And I don't know how long it was, but it was, I don't know. It was at least a half an hour. Whew. That was very like, oh, the things I'm doing for art. And there were like bugs flying all over. It was just, whew. Yeah, then, and I will say, oops, the cyanotype, one of the reasons I love it so much is because the way that you work with it varies like dramatically depending on what time of year it is and what the weather is like. So you might get like a 5-minute exposure and it's this really bright blue in the middle of summer and it's sunny out and you're like, you know, in a place that is like closer to the equator, or, you know, like today would be a day that you would get terrible cyanotypes or very faint cyanotypes. I shouldn't judge them. And in the winter time, you know, it takes like 2 days for them to expose. So it's like a seasonal awareness practice that I really like. This is a triptych woodblock series that I did called Loss and Repair. These are 3 different ecosystems that have experienced some kind of disruption, but are also experiencing some type of regeneration. So it's sort of challenging that narrative that, you know, the forest fire is I guess it's challenging the narrative of apocalypse, you know. So this forest fire one on the far end, is got some Douglas fir cones that are germinating. They need to have fire to germinate, or fire helps them germinate. There's some morels in there. The one in the middle is a clear cut off of Highway 104 by where we used to live, that has just like awesome fireweed and salmonberry and all these other plants that grow right after trees have been cleared for one reason or another. And then the one on the right is a nurse stump that was on the property that Nico and I used to live on. That's from the first wave of logging. You can tell when a stump was the first, like was an old growth, like original, like baddie that got logged first, because they're humongous, but they're cut like here because the equipment that they had at the time during like the first wave of logging wasn't powerful enough to get them all the way at the base. So if you see these like giant stumps that are tall, that conceivably is like the remnant of a many hundreds-year-old tree. And I just think that's really, really cool. And then these were dyed with Douglas fir and madrone bark, which is really high in tannins. So that's why they're brown and weird looking up there.
They different types of paper.
They're all different types of paper. This is all it was just a bath mixed with Douglas fir and madrone. Yeah, and some of the paper took it in different ways. If you have seen my work, you've seen this already, but I'm proud of it, so that's why I put it in. This was I did 2 prints last year that are pretty big for a block print, 12-inch by 12-inch, I think, around whales. This one's called Teacher. It's an edition of 20. I ran it through the printing press. I'm interested in whales as this like representation of the end of an epoch, or as these fellow sentient beings whose sentience we're not really appreciating, and like what that means. And yeah, again, a lot of these like relief prints, that's what this is in the wood block, are also just studies on like improving my craft, which I'm really grateful for the Alchemy Print Studio for having all this stuff I need to just like try to get really good at printmaking. This is called Relatives, and this is another whale print of the Southern residents. So again, just interested in the image of whales and how they're almost like a meme here, or like even in Puget Sound too. Like they're this like little icon that is like representative of place. But it's really weird because, you know, their future is really in question, right? I took a boat home last year and was talking to these tourists who went on a tour, a whale tour, and I was like, yeah, isn't it sad that they're, you know, having such a hard time? And they were like, what do you mean? And I thought that was really interesting, just like this like iconic thing that like people from all over the world associate with like this place, and then they're in this space of being really threatened. So it also was thinking about like art as prayer when I was making those. Cool. Now we're in work that I've done in the last couple months. I am really interested in multicolor screen printing right now. So this is a 5-color screen print called The Harbor. And really process driven piece. I'm not sure what the themes are for the work that I'm currently making, which I feel really just like soothed by. I think that it can be really oppressive for me to just like be constantly thinking about themes. So this is just a playful and fun thing that helped me learn how to really nail multicolor screen printing and interested in like the motif of hands right now and kelp and how their form is really like repeats itself like in each other. And then again, hands and kelp. This is the seed. So this is another 5-color screen print that is based on a drawing that I had done for a really specific project that went in a super different direction, and that direction shift was really hard on me, and I felt like very like I'm cherishing this image. So I'm feeling this like really strong sense of relief that I've been able to turn it into a complete piece in this. And these are both fairly big. They're probably like about 18 by 24. Yeah. These are part of a big series that I'm in process with right now that I think there's about 10 big cyanotypes that I'm working with, and I may create more. These are on really heavy duty watercolor paper. They're probably each 20 by 30. And yeah, this is a good example of cyanotype being able to be used as a photographic medium. So if you see these like two little portal kind of images or the ferns in the middle on this guy, those are photographs. And so you contact print the photograph onto the cyanotype coated surface. And then there's also a lot of contact printing happening. So that's when you put objects onto the surface and it makes an imprint of whatever the object was. And then I'm also interested in using some of my screen printing process stuff because of the other part about printmaking specifically is that you generate a lot of objects that aren't actually they're not part of the finished piece. So you might spend a lot of time making a sketch and then it turns into a transparency and then it turns into a screen. And at that point you've made like 0 parts of the final piece, which is sort of weird. And then it's kind of like, well, what do I do with this? So I like trying to, repurpose it. And yeah, this series, I'm not sure where it's going yet, but I'm working with ideas around memory, time, portals, and choices. So those are some little theme buzzwords. And then, oh yeah, I'm super excited about this right now. This is an example of some natural dye screen printing that I've been doing. So this is a big research experiment thing. So one of the folks that works out of the print studio has been telling me about using seaweed as a thickener to turn a natural dye, which is a liquid, into a gel that then can be pushed through a screen like screen printing ink. So this image on the left is a bull kelp image that I drew and then printed on a really big piece of silk that has been dyed with hops and madder. Madder is a root that makes red dye. And then on top of that, I screen printed this image, and that ink is made out of a plant called logwood, which is really cool purple dye, and seaweed. So just the idea that like this entire piece is made out of like accessible biodegradable materials, not like biodegradable materials, quote unquote, that have been, synthesized or whatever in a factory and I couldn't make myself, but like I can make all of these things myself. I guess I can't make silk, but I could probably figure that out. So I'm still in a lot of experimental, I'm in an experimental space with this and still trying to learn about it. I'm doing a lot of research. I'm really excited about it. And so the image at the bottom is just that same logwood ink with the same image on different surfaces or different dyed pieces of silk. And then these are just some natural dye studies that I'm incorporating and trying to figure out different colors and how to get the brightest pigments possible with plants. And then upcycling and working with clothing is a really big part of my process. And these are just a few of the pieces of clothing that I've been making in the last couple months. So these are cyanotypes, naturally dyed things, and but naturally dyed screen print. I guess I need to figure out a zippy way to say that. Screen printing with natural dyes. So just a small little sample, but I do this a lot, like in conjunction with the bigger, maybe more conceptual or more technical pieces. I'll just, as I'm making something really big and I've got extra of something, I'll layer it up on a shirt and maybe cyanotype and then natural dye and then screen print and then block print on it. And yeah. And then the last thing is very in process, but I'm just so excited about it. So you have to excuse the maybe not the most glamorous photograph that's ever been taken, but this is gigantic piece of wool. This is a wool blanket that's been bundle dyed, which is one of the things that I teach in the natural dyes classes. So yeah, it's hard to show the scale, but this is like probably a king size blanket. And all of these stripes are made with different types of raw plant material that's been sprinkled on directly onto the fabric that's been treated through this process called mordanting. And the colors are just like unbelievably rich, and it's cool because it's a little bit like printmaking, because you're sprinkling this plant material on it, and then you're bundling it up really tight and you're steaming it, and the pigment from the plants releases into the fabric in the shape of whatever the plant was. So these big blobs up here are marigold flowers, and these are individual marigold petals, and these are scabiosa flowers. And I just promise it's really, 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 really cool. And I also, you can't see it on this big side, but there's a ton of hands. I like stripe screen printed all these hands that are reaching for these orbs that I'm really excited about repeating through my work.
Did you use natural dyes for those hands?
Yeah, so that's marigold. So this is marigold over here, like bundle dyed, and then this is marigold with the sodium alginate, aka seaweed, in there. Yeah. I don't know how I'm doing on time, but
Are you gonna take any questions?
yeah. What? Yeah.
You were talking about logwood. Is that like log wood, or is it a plant called logwood?
That is
Did I mishear it?
It's a plant called logwood.
Okay.
It's a tree.
Okay.
And it is the wood. It's a dumb name. It's the wood of the logwood tree.
Never heard it.
Yeah, it's a tree from Mexico, Central America, and
Sweet.
maybe South America.
And I have another question. You were talking about the 4 things that you're really focused on right now: memories, time, portals, and something else.
Oh, choices.
Choices.
I was like, I don't know. I don't know. I'm not gonna know. Yeah.
No, I just love that. I think
Oh, thanks. Yeah. Yeah. Really. Oh, yes.
From watching you die, I've noticed that.
Yeah.
I've noticed that the colors of the materials are often
Like this.
very, very different from the colors you have.
Yeah.
Can you talk about
I don't know. That's
maybe can you talk about like some of the exciting color changes that you experienced and
yeah.
what that might mean for your work thematically?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, the colors, there's light sensitive, or there's colors that react to light. Then that just means we can see them. And then there's colors that are water soluble, and that's a whole different chemical universe. I know this is weird. And those two things don't have anything to do with each other often. So natural dyeing is inherently experimental because what you see is not what you're going to get. So you can work with information that you already have and then know what you're going to get, or you can work off of information from the like great resource that is like human history, and being like, I know that this makes this, but you can also do it, and I often do it from this way of like, I wonder. So it's definitely like a way for me to engage in my sense of wonder. Yeah, is that a good answer? Yeah. Yeah, because I don't know what's going to happen, and that's just so relaxing. It's just like so nice to not know what's going to happen, you know. Oh, hi. Well, I wish, this is going to make me sound like a huge poser, but I did buy sodium alginate, which is what I heard through the grapevine works, but it's just seaweed. So now that I know that's successful, my plan is to dehydrate a bunch of bull kelp and then powder it and then see if that does the same thing. And I'm expecting that it will. Yeah.
It's dehydrating right now.
It is. It's currently dehydrating. Yeah.
You're not a poser. It's dehydrating right now.
Thanks. Okay. Cool.
Ooh,
Oh, love it.
Carrie knows lots of
island
secrets.
secrets.
Yeah, Carrie knows all the seaweed secrets. Sweet.
Katie, I'm curious about when you're doing cyanotype and getting photo imprints, are you using a negative?
Yeah. So you print a negative of the same size that you would want it to be printed at. So
How do you do that?
you just print it on transparency paper, transparency, like acetate.
Right.
And then you can tile images and make them really big if you want. So the limiting factor, there's no limiting factor really, but like you have the 8.5 by 11 that fits in a printer. And then
The sun goes through the acetate to the
yeah,
whatever
and
it
it
is.
blocks the dark part of the image blocks off the sun, and then so that stays white. And then the part that the sun can touch turns blue. So you have to reverse it. So it's a negative, just like a photographic negative is. So I will print that out from like a digital image, or I will take a film image and then scan it into my computer and then print it out and then make the image out. Yeah.
Elaine Sloboda has a question.
You do? Or is she just saying hi?
I have a question.
What?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Like, what's your biggest dream about, like, if you could do like anything for art, or like, I don't know, what's your biggest dream in terms of like the art world, or like, what are you like reaching for next?
That's a great question. Thanks for asking me. Yeah, I mean, I think I would really love to be teaching more in different places, and I want to have enough space and time to create like a body of work that both hits that like process satisfaction that I was talking a lot about, but also is I guess like broad enough or deep enough that I could like really explore themes and see them through in a way that felt satisfying. I would love to, like, you know, show a bunch of work that was all related and all like considered in like a huge room. I would like to have a big art show. Yeah. Thanks for asking. What is this chat? Yay, we love Katie. Oh, that's nice. Cool. Yeah, does anyone have any other questions? Yes, Glenn.
Would you consider teaching a natural dye class when if you
Yes.
fire process?
Yes, maybe Gail can like co-teach it with me. Yes, I would.
Oh, excellent.
Cool. These, full disclosure, these are like my like closest homies, and it's really nice that they came from the internet to be they're still disembodied, I guess. They're just.
You're making your IRL audience jealous.
Just stop the recording whenever you're done.
Okay,
And
this
then, yeah.
stop.
Resuming recording. Recording in progress. Welcome back to the Alchemy Art Center, last artist talk of the season. We are very excited to invite our next speaker up, but before we do, we just have one announcement to make, which is that our November fall fundraiser is just around the corner, and we are spreading the word. We are raising funds for our next year of operation. This is a really big fundraiser for us. It always is every fall. And we are hoping that you can help us as our community spread the word to those who want to support community arts in all of its various forms.
And
come to our
there's gonna be a
fundraiser
delicious dinner. Gretchen, who started Duck Soup, is doing our menu.
on the
There's gonna be
DL.
local wine. Yes, that's it. We're not allowed to write that down, but we're allowed to say it verbally.
But she's doing
But
it.
she is doing it. And we're gonna have local wine and Carrie's elixirs, and it's gonna be really wonderful. And we're gonna have really special, cool auction things. And this literally is a really important part of how we're able to keep running Alchemy, which is a really becoming more and more a really special, valuable community resource that I hope you just can't imagine San Juan Island without, and it moves you to want to come to our fundraiser or tell your friends.
Yeah. So it's at the Brickworks. Thank you so much for asking. It's at the Brickworks in Friday Harbor on November 4th, which is a Friday.
And if you were on the newsletter list, you would get an invitation.
Yeah, and it's at 5 p.m. to 9 p.m. And there will also be live music by live music. Maybe we haven't asked somebody about that yet.
There'll at least be a harp playing.
Oh
We
yeah,
have
there will
asked
definitely be
for
a
it.
harpist, a
Yeah.
very wonderful harpist. Okay, anyways, we are very excited to welcome Shannon Borg up to speak. She's an awesome oil painter. She's an art career coach, and she's like so many other things. She's a poet. And she told me earlier that she really loves public speaking, which I just wanted to say because I just find that amazing. I've never met anybody.
I also like that.
I've hardly met anybody who actually says that, who actually likes, yeah.
One of the
Anyways.
things about this artist talk is that we try to pair a local artist with similar themes or similar materials or something that sort of rings a bell with one of our visiting artists. And so we saw the connection between Katey and Shannon in their artwork, both in that Shannon has a printmaking practice, which is cool. And also they both make work that's about a sense of place, and maybe you'll notice that too. So join along.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Okay.
Commonality there. Okay, so
Thank you so much. I'm really happy to be here. Thank you to Alchemy for asking me. I mean, that was like such an honor. It's so weird how these things happen. I literally had a conversation with my friend Wendy over dinner a week earlier, and we were thinking about what about we have a group or a party where we can give talks for each other. And then literally a week later, Glenn asked me to do this. And so that was just very bizarre, but I'm really happy to be here. And also, Alchemy, thank you for doing the classes, because I've taken printmaking classes and pottery classes and, the raku class and all of that. And I wish I could do more, but it's so great to know you guys are there and just this amazing part of our community. So thank you. And the museum. Thank you. Okay, so I'm just going to start with my presentation, and I'm going to share my screen here and flip through it. So let's make that, full.
Oh, if you go to the top, those little dots in the audience window.
In the window,
There's like 3
top
gray
left,
dots.
Pause to the left. Right here.
right there. Oh, oh my gosh, that's hilarious. Okay. I am 58 years old. Okay, actually not till December 31st. Okay. Okay, so island. I live here on San Juan Island. I used to live on Orcas, and before that I've lived a lot of other places, but I wanted to, before I kind of get into my talk, I'll give you a little background too, like Katey did. I'm from Spokane, and that's inland, but I always knew that I would live by the water, on the water, and that's always kind of been an obsession with me. And my background is writing, really, more than visual art. So, and I'm flipping. Okay, there we go. So my background is writing. I went to UW and I have an MFA in poetry, and then I went to the University of Houston. And after that, I didn't end up teaching poetry. I ended up going into the web world. So when the whole, it was all blowing up and you could write about baking a chicken and make, for the internet and make money doing that. That's what I did. So I started writing about food, wine, and travel. And I wrote for Seattle Magazine for many years, and I published a couple books. But always in the back of my mind, I really wanted to learn how to oil paint. And so I've always thought of myself as sort of like this little freak artist in the body of a writer, but writing came easier to me, and visual art was always really intimidating. And I was one of those very fearful people who did not think that what I made was any good. I was no good. I was not talented, all those kind of things. So finally, literally, when I turned 50, it was really a big moment in that I decided to go back to art school. So I saved my money, saved my pennies, quit my job. The planets aligned so I could go to Gage Academy of Art for 2 years in Seattle. And I did their program for 1 year. And then I did an atelier program in oil painting for another year. And in Georgetown with Kimberly Trowbridge, who was my teacher over there in the upper right. And it was amazing. So if anybody ever has a chance to do their Studio Arts Intensive program or any classes through Gage, it was life-changing, really. So I lived on Orcas, and because I had been in the food and wine business and really loved oysters, knew a lot of oyster farmers, ranchers, people who had oyster farms, and I lived near Olga, I thought, okay, maybe I can draw oysters. Maybe they're the simplest thing that I can just like sketch out and it will be simple. And how wrong I was. Of course, as Katey was talking about, I love this idea of eco-succession, of how the layers of things like, working in a perfect world, there's more and more complexity. And as I was learning, I just realized like how complex the beach was. So today I'm going to talk about the beach and my process. So the beach as process, the beach as elemental, and the beach as abstract. And one thing that really I've been thinking and reading a lot about lately is the history of landscape painting is the history of the way that we view time. So we think about cycles, we think about linear time, and then we think about the web. So before the Industrial Revolution or before medieval shift, the shift of the Renaissance, time was cyclical. It was seasons, spring came every year, things repeated and they returned. And then in the Industrial Revolution, we kind of invented the future, like the idea of the future created this idea of progress. And now, of course, we have the web. So in cycles, the first landscape paintings were just events of volcanoes or springtime or sort of a moment in time in this cycle that people lived in. And it was very elemental. It was very simple. And of course, many cultures are based on this. And in China, the idea of the elements are actually not things, like fire's not a thing, fire's a process. And wood changes to fire, fire changes to earth, earth changes to metal, metal gets affected by water. And so the whole idea of elements is about the process of the elements, not just the thing itself. Linear time really from the Renaissance onward, changed the way we thought about the future. And ironically, when we invented the future in the medieval to the Renaissance period, we invented the idea of progress. That's when we started to destroy the earth. So it's kind of in a big way anyway. You know, we've always destroyed, humans have always destroyed the planet, but perspective, linear perspective, you can see here in this image of, this is cephalism, where everybody's head is at the same level. That's a part of linear perspective. And it was an easy way for painters to put their people in perspective. They'd make the people smaller, but all the heads at the same level. And just this idea of progress. And also it was really how they saw light. So linear perspective was about optics. And if you look at this picture by Lippi, there's the dove, which comes down from God. And they believe that light came out of our eyes and also came from things in cones, like in Euclid shaped cones that you see in the slit in her dress. She's holding her dress back. There's a cone of little light rays. So her light rays are going out of her dress. It's hard to see. And the light rays from God are meeting it. And so God's rays actually overpowered Mary's rays and made her pregnant. So it was kind of like the scientific / religious realization of this is how light works. And so God can travel on light down to earth and make the earth. But things changed so much. So the idea of, this is Brunelleschi's perspective. He invented this concept. He took Euclid, which was earth measure, geometry, earth measure. We're measuring the earth, which I love. And he created linear perspective to make us be able to look God in the eye and look things in the eye so we could have a religious experience, which is interesting because people think of it as science, but really it was also meant to create a religious experience for the viewer. And then Alberti created this little square, the window that you look through, which separated things into little squares or pixels. And so then from there, here we have scale drawing and the map of Google Earth now. So linear perspective brought us the telescope, which was first called the perspective tube, and mapping, scale drawings. And because of scale drawings, we have the Industrial Revolution, we have film, television, computers, the pixel, fractals, space travel, and medical research. So kind of interesting that one concept has really created our whole culture. Okay, and then of course we now have the web. The web is not, it's since Einstein really, the idea that space and time are intertwined, that, and artists were really presaging this idea. If you've ever read this book called Art and Physics, it's one of my favorite books, and it's all about how the artists saw things first. So Georgiana Houghton really painted spiritual experiences, and Hilma af Klint, you know, they were painting these spiritual experiences, and Kandinsky, but they were responding to the idea of light and matter as a spiritual experience. And then Einstein, you know, discovered relativity. So suddenly we have a web instead of just linear time. We have time being everywhere. We can go onto this nerd box and go back in time. We can think about the future here. So art has always changed things ahead of science. Of course, we have Escher, and then I love Diebenkorn because, of course, it's a beach, but also the idea of flattening out time and space into a flat plane instead of perspective. So I'm going to talk about, I'm sorry, oops, I'm going back. I want to go back. How come I can't go back? Oh, there we go. I'm going to go back. Hitting the thing wrong. Back in time, right? That's so cool. Okay, the beach as process. I think I love to go to the beach because, and I go to South Beach. So South Beach is the one place mostly that I paint or think about. And the thing is, the beach is kind of this space between everything. It's cyclical. It's also linear because it has a past, present, and a future. It's also a web because all of this information is downloaded from all of the plants and animals that come there, and they share information and they move information between each other. So it's about birth, rebirth, growth, and decay, geological and human time, memory and community, the sun and seasons, and the moon and tides. So those are some of the things that the beach does for me. Plato talked about the 5 elements, earth, air, fire, and water, and also ether, which he saw as kind of the universe, like everything else that wasn't those 4 things. And then I kind of bring those together with the Chinese elements, which were the processes of fire, earth, metal, water, and wood. And then also, go slow, there we go. And then I've kind of added into my cosmology numbers in the void. So they can be seen as elements in that Empedocles in the 5th century BC saw them as, in addition to Plato's elements, earth, air, fire, water, he saw them as the 2 forces in the universe that create everything. And he called them love and strife. So harmony and chaos. And so to me, it's the void, of course, like the yin factor of emptiness, id, the unconscious, the moon, yin, and the shadow, also against, working with and against harmony or on, light, fullness, infinity, ego, consciousness, and yang, and sunlight. So Empedocles called it love and strife, and it's really kind of like the 2 forces that add on to these other elements for me. Fire, earth, metal, water, wood, air, numbers, and void. So I'm going to flip through some of my work where I'm thinking about these things. So I took a pinhole camera class, and this lower image is from that pinhole camera class. And the cool thing about it was, like, this image could have been taken 150 years ago. Yeah, it was a 3-minute exposure at the beach. And yeah, it was really cool to kind of be there. No one else was there, and just like lift this little shutter and wait for 3 minutes for the light to go in. And then I had made the camera out of my grandmother's jewelry box. So the idea of like the past and in the present and creating this image that was like 150 years old. So I love, this is a charcoal drawing, the idea of the void, of these structures that people build as entry into the self and entry into the labyrinth of the mind. Franz Klein does this so brilliantly. That's almost like, calligraphy with his black, white, and gray images. So the next one is fire. I love Renee Magritte, The Ladder of Fire. It's just these 3 things that are on fire. And it's surreal, but it's cool because metal is burning, so I love, it just fits this idea so great. Fire is light, and the idea of these fire pits are really ancient and communal and ritual, of people coming together on the beach, and how it's like the crucible of, everyone goes and they stare at the flame, and also light itself is the fire that hits these structures, and they're white, they're like canvas, and the light touches them and creates color on them. And then I try to capture a little bit of that color. I didn't even know until I made this slide that I was trying to replicate Claude Monet. But when he painted the Rouen Cathedral paintings, what he rented a room in a lingerie shop across the street, and he set up like 10 canvases with, I don't know, but I kind of imagine like 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, 6 o'clock, whatever. And he would pick one up for an hour, paint the light, and then put it back. And he was not painting the edifice. He was painting what he called the envelope, which was the air that was between him and the church. And so at different times of day, there was different air, different light that was in that envelope. And it's just, you know, brilliant. Water I see as very abstract. It's changes shape wherever it is, obviously. It is delicate, but it's also creates everything that we see as far as like all the, you know, it changes rock, right? It changes all those pieces of sand are because rock has rubbed against other rock because of water mostly, and wind and tide, but water is extremely powerful. And these are just panoramas that I've kind of done a long series of panorama photographs. And as you move, the waves keep coming in. So it takes this picture of the waves continuing. Earth. I love to think about earth and water as having downward motion and fire and air as having upward motion. They rise, and earth and water always go down. So this idea of earth as solid, but it shifts and changes all the time. This is a hold fast and on kelp. So earth is being moved around by plants all the time. So that process is really interesting, and how abstract and strange it can be. And wood, of course. Wood is these trees that were once seedlings, seeds, and then they grew, and then they died, and they fell off cliffs, and they floated from Canada, and they ended up on our shores. And so that process of then built the human element of building something, and the impulse to build home or a shrine or an altar or create a ritual around community and around self-improvement or self-growth, self-exploration is really fascinating to me. So I don't build any of these structures that I paint. I just photograph them and then I paint them.
What is the paint on the one in the middle, the central?
Oh yeah, so this is a digital image of one of my paintings with the original photograph digitally put on it, and then of course color manipulated a little bit. But yeah, it was kind of fun to explore that, and I've only made a few of those, but I may make some more because it was really cool to try that.
Right.
Yes. So the lower right is the photograph, and then I make a charcoal drawing of it by hand, and then just do like a drippy underpainting for texture, and then start painting in the dark parts. And yeah. And
wait, what about the one?
And this one?
Yeah, what's going on
So I made like a lot of like texture drips on the back of just a canvas, and then I drew with charcoal that structure, and then I started to paint in these other parts on top of it. So in this idea of eco-succession, I love that, and just the layers of time and the layer, that's what I'm trying to capture, is like the layers of time that we don't see, that's always changing. And in the painting, there's all these layers that you know are happening. So, and metal. The metal fire pit is a gathering place. It's also, you know, mineral, but it's formed by humans. It is manipulatable, malleable, but it also decays. And it has just some beautiful shapes as metal, but also as a fire. This is just a watercolor that I made a few years ago, and then I just love taking photographs out there. And then numbers. So my fondest dream is to make more abstract paintings, and it's not as easy as it seems. you know, these people like Franz Klein who can just like make a big shape and it can be beautiful. It's like, this is my struggle of trying to make things less recognizable. And so I'm always trying to find new processes to do that. And in fact, right now I have a process called the moon process, where I think of the 4 phases of the moon and identify, you know, emerge, I emerge an image, and then I illuminate the image like the full moon. And then I think of the image, and then I surrender to the image, and that's like a half moon. And then the new moon is integrate. And so I try to go through that process like over and over. And mostly it's surrender, like just give up and go on to the next thing, you know. So it's just a constant process. And so that's kind of it right now. This is my little camera from the pinhole camera class. And then talk about mistakes and being open. This middle image with the yellow light at the top, what happened was I was going to be the featured artist at Friday Harbor Atelier. And so I took one of my paper paintings that are on, you know, oil paper, and it's big, and I was going to put it against the wall, and it was so strong that it wouldn't like stay on the wall. So I thought, oh, I'll just like leave it as a tube, because it wants to naturally, it's in a roll, so it wanted to naturally just like be in a tube. So I set it up, and I didn't realize there was a light above it. And so,
Oh, cool.
yeah, and so at night I was like, oh my gosh, that's cool. So because some paints are transparent and some are opaque, that really made a difference in how the light was gonna shine through. So I started experimenting with this and creating what I call them lunaria, because they create this kind of moon shape on the ceiling, and then putting a light in it that can be changed or rotated on a different light, you know, by remote. So there's one in the window at Waterworks right now, and I have a couple pieces at Waterworks if anyone wants to see more pieces. And also, and some there. Also, I would love to stay in touch with anybody that wants to. If you want to put your name on the list, I write and I blog about some of these ideas, and I coach artists, and I'm always thinking about like how to make that better and help people with their websites and their businesses and so on. So that's kind of what I do. But as far as looking forward, I want to make an installation in a larger space with like a bunch of these, and then also objects made out of clay, which I've made some. And my mentor is here, Casey. She's helped me understand how to make some pottery objects, which I just want to make a pile of beach junk, you know. But of course, that's like a longer conversation. Anyway, so thank you very much. And if you have any questions, I would love to talk. Yeah.
Yes. I'm wondering if there's an element that you talked about today that resonates more with your body or your identity, or that you would round up to being a favorite.
Interesting.
And if so, what does that mean for using or depicting that art? What sort of special attention do you give it?
Right. Well, wow, that's like choosing amongst your children, you know. It really is, because one thing fades into the other thing, and the next thing and the next thing. It's like none of them can exist without each other. You know, it's like a 5-pointed star, a 7-pointed star, or 8-pointed star. If you take one point out, then you only have, you know, you don't have all the points to it. I love air because of that envelope idea. Like, only what I can see is, you know, is the light that's coming back to me. And in fact, I love this idea that what we see is actually only what's rejected by the thing. So I see a red apple, and that apple is everything except red, because what happens is the light hits it and it reflects the red wavelengths back to me. It absorbs everything else. Right. So, an apple is actually the opposite of red. I only see the red. So I love that idea of like negative, positive, thinking about light in its physical characteristics, you know? And when you said that pink matter, you showed that piece of fabric that was dyed with matter. I'm like, oh, look at that color. It's the same as the pink matter or the quinacridone magenta. And that color was taken from a photograph. And this is what I do. I go to the beach and take photographs and then kind of choose one color and like go out from there. But remember all the sunsets when it was so smoky and just like super bright. So we were seeing everything because all of the particles in the smoke in the air was only allowing the red to come through to us. And so it was very intense because all the blue and the other parts of the spectrum were being refracted. So anyway, that's a long answer to a short question. Any other? Yeah.
You mentioned that you just like South Beach is like your muse, if you will.
Yeah.
And I'm just curious to hear about your relationship. Is it your relationship to the place, or is it part of your process to pick like a place and just get to really know that over time?
It's the relationship to the place. It's really the first place I came, literally, when I came to the island, set foot on the island, because I was on a honeymoon years ago and kind of saw it from afar, and then came back single, and now I'm, exploring my own life and blissfully single, as they say, as I say, married to myself. Anyway, so the idea of the beach was that I came for a cheese making class. Lainey gave a cheese making class, and I was like online in Seattle going, I'm gonna go to a cheese making class. And so I got, and the only ferry I could get was 6 a.m. I got here, they weren't open, she wasn't open. So I'm like, where do I go? Oh, there's a beach. I went out there and it was like amazing to watch, the sunrise there. And so I go there. I live 10 minutes from this incredible place. When you look at it, it's like gray, some wood, some rocks, water, you know what I mean? But after, it's just like anything, I think in nature, when we go there over and over, we start to really see the depth and the complexity in the pile of kelp that's covered with bugs, and the lines. And so I think it's my relationship with the place that then taught me how to look at it,
It's a very special place.
Yeah, it really is. We're very fortunate to have it.
Do you always paint photographs or do you paint as well?
I do paint from life, and there was a picture of me at the beach there. It's so fun to be able to match color. Like, oh wow, I went out there on that misty day and it's like this gray, and I took 2 colors, orange and blue, because that's orange and Payne's gray, which is blue, dark blue. It makes a better gray blue. And so taking those 2 colors, which to me are the colors of the beach, because when you blend them, they become green and gray, and they can be very pale gray, blue, water, etc. So yeah, I love to paint out there as well, but it's also depends on the wind and take a lot of bungees. And also I want to make big pieces, so it's really hard to take big pieces out there. So I just sketch or do little things and then take it back and work from that. So yeah.
Well, I just think that these lit up ones are super cool, and I'm wondering, I love that, that happy accident aspect to it, and I'm wondering if you have plans to make more things where you're incorporating light as like a design element.
Yeah,
as
as
you
an
like have that in mind and you're like making material choices based on that, or
yeah, well, so far it's just these things, and I'm making kind of a bunch of them and exploring like what happens if I paint on both sides of the paper, and what kind of paints will work. And because I want to make, like, the one on the left is fire, right? It's more elemental. The other one is more like a landscape. But and it's all kind of new, but yeah, I would love to see, 20 of them in a darkened room. That's kind of a goal, but like where and when, who knows? Anyway,
Yeah, you can do it back nice. We got a spot for that. shit.
dark, yeah, that would be fun. That
Yeah.
would be super cool. Thank you. Okay, well, thank you so much for coming. And stop recording.